Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to a new series of The Health Show Live here on the Islam channel with me, Alistair Greener. Now, over the past year, we've brought you live surgeries, alternative forms of medicine and give you an insight to the challenges that doctors and surgeons face in the medical field. Now we're bringing you a weekly show where we tackle everyday health problems. Now, every week I'll be joined by a health expert who, within their field, will discuss preventions to health issues our loved ones face, mostly caused by health and unhealthy lifestyles. We'll then look at how you can change your health for the better. Focusing and discussing on a particular health topic each week, be it diabetes, stomach aches, bowel cancer or weight loss, you, the viewer, will have the opportunity to call in live or email any questions you may have to our guest health expert relating to that particular topic. Now, the number to call will be 020 7374 6423. And you can also email us at healthshow@islamchannel.tv. The details are shown on your screen below. Now, the lines will be open later on in the show, so don't call quite yet. Now, we must stress that should you suffer from any medical problem, it's always highly recommended that you contact your doctor or GP, as the Health Show gives you an alternative viewpoint to the health concern being discussed. So, what about today? Well, last week we were joined by nutritionist Joe Travers, who spoke about the importance of nutrition within our diet and the steps needed to enjoy a healthy lifestyle. We had lots and lots of inquiries, which is really good to know, as we were able to guide our viewers at home. So thank you again for sending in your questions and keep them coming in this week. Talking of this week, we welcome Mr Inderpaul Birdi, who is a consultant in cardiac surgeon, and he has an international reputation in heart surgery and a specialist interest in keyhole heart surgery. He's a lead clinician and director of the Keyhole Heart Clinic, a trusted organisation that's committed to providing patients with both information and clinical access to specialised, minimally invasive cardiac therapies within the most prestigious hospitals in the United Kingdom. But before we speak to the man himself, let's see him in action.
Until recently in the UK, keyhole surgery was only used for relatively straightforward procedures like hernia repairs, gallbladder removals and appendectomies. The Harley Street Clinic, part of the HCA group of hospitals in London, is helping pioneer its use in heart surgery. Mr Inderpaul Birdi leads the specialist keyhole heart surgery team at the Harley Street Clinic and also at his NHS practice in Essex.
In the UK, it's very new. There are very, very few centres doing any large volume of keyhole heart surgery. But of course, in Europe and in the US for the last decade, there have been a number of units performing surgery of this type with very good results.
One of the recent beneficiaries of this procedure is Felicity Young, who had been living with the symptoms of a damaged mitral valve, one of the 4 valves in the heart, for some years.
I think probably the first difficulty is that I noticed that I was getting increased breathlessness. And then my husband actually discovered that I'd got a murmur because he listened to, being an ex-GP, he listened to my chest because I had a really severe cold. And then I was referred to the cardiac specialist in Colchester, who, after some tests, said that I'd got a severe prolapsed mitral valve with a moderate leak.
Mrs Young was referred to Mr Birdi as a possible candidate for keyhole heart surgery to repair the damaged valve.
So here is an echocardiogram of Mrs Young's heart pre-operatively, and we see the very powerful left ventricle that pumps blood around the body and the smaller, less powerful left atrium into which blood from the lungs arrives. Here is her mitral valve. This valve normally opens in one direction and closes when the ventricle contracts to prevent blood from travelling back towards the lungs through the left atrium. Now, if we are to put some special colour flow on here to look at where that blood is flowing, we see that when the ventricle contracts, we have a huge amount of colour going backwards. That represents blood leaking back through the valve towards the left atrium and towards the lungs.
Mr Birdi very clearly explained that the options are either conventional surgery, heart surgery, which involved cutting down through the sternum, or, because his speciality is keyhole surgery, that's what he also offered. And it was up to the patient, up to me, to choose which I would like, and he would, even if at the last minute I changed my mind, he would respect that. And I chose to have keyhole surgery.
Your GP sent you to me because he's recognised that you have a...
For Mr Birdi's younger patients, the minimal scarring associated with keyhole surgery is a particularly attractive benefit. For all patients, the incision heals much more quickly than cutting through the bone, 10 days on average, rather than 12 weeks. It's been just over 2 months since Mrs Young had keyhole surgery, and Mr Birdi has been following her progress.
And here we have the post-operative echocardiogram, and here we have the mitral valve. You see the normal anterior door or leaflet that was always working normally, and we see now it meets perfectly the posterior leaflet, and there is no high riding or prolapse of that leaflet into the left atrium. So a very good result.
For Mrs Young's husband, a retired GP, the speed of her recovery has been remarkable.
I just find it truthfully miraculous that she should have surgery one afternoon and then a few days later she's walking home or walking to the car. No, it's staggering. I just cannot even now get over it. Even being in the game, I still find it miraculous.
She's gardening now, she's mobilising well, she's taking walks regularly, and I expect that over the course of the next few weeks she will recover so much more of her previous exercise capacity, the sort of things that she couldn't do before her surgery.
Repairing the mitral valve is only one of the keyhole heart surgery procedures that the team perform. They also treat patients with heart rhythm disorders, coronary artery disease and aortic valve disease, both at Mr Birdi's NHS practice and at the Harley Street Clinic.
The Harley Street Clinic has an international reputation, and it deserves that international reputation. I think the clinical governance process that are associated with introducing new techniques like minimally invasive cardiac surgery are exactly how I would wish them to be.
I would definitely recommend it, and indeed I have with 2 people who I've met who have got valve problems, that if they get given the option of either the conventional way or the keyhole surgery, if they're suitable to go for the keyhole surgery, because of the recovery time is so much quicker and less discomfort.
I still, as I say, I'm astounded by the recovery time, which is so small, that fist is almost back to normal, and in such a short time. No, it's terrific.
So, Mr Inderpaul Birdi, thank you so much indeed for coming into the show today. It must be great watching a clip like that, to see the success story and to see it all the way through and the transformation it can make to someone's life.
Well, Alistair, it's a pleasure to be here, and what a delight to see Felicity looking so well. And it's a delight to see so many patients going through heart surgery with the trepidation and the anxieties that they face when they're told that they need it, coming out of the other end, really healing up so much quicker than they otherwise would had they had their operation done through the traditional procedure through the breastbone, which is something that really scares patients, probably more than any other part of heart surgery that we currently do today.
We'll come to the actual different surgeries in a moment. Let's start with the real basics. So we hear the term cardiac and so on. Can you explain exactly what that is and list of what different types of heart surgery that there are?
Well, cardiac really refers to the heart, and we all know that the heart's a very important organ in the body. It's a muscle, but it seems to regulate itself. It beats throughout our lives, many, many thousands of beats per hour, and really it's pumping blood around the body. It's a pump. And there are many different types of conditions that can affect the way the heart works. The first type of condition that can affect the way the heart works is the amount of blood that it receives. And the most common type of heart disease that people know about is when they have coronary artery disease or a blocked heart artery and they need bypass grafts to improve the blood supply to the engine of the heart. In other words, the fuel of the engine is not as good as it needs to be for the engine to work properly, and we need to create some new fuel pipes. Interestingly now, there are newer ways to improve the blood supply to the heart when we've got blocked arteries, and that is to put in little stents through the groin on a wire, really truly keyhole types of treatments. And stents have grown enormously over the last 20 years to provide a very important part of the treatment strategy that we have for people with coronary artery disease. But of course, the other thing that people don't always realise is that blood has to go one way when it travels through the body, one way. And the only way it can do that is by having valves within it. And valve disease is one of those diseases that we have really failed to understand fully in terms of the effect that it can have on patients, the way they feel, but more important than that for me as a doctor, how long they live. Valves can leak, and that can create pressure downstream, and in Felicity's case, the pressure downstream is to the lungs. Damage to the lungs can reduce her lifespan. It can create chest pain because if you have something like aortic stenosis, you get thickening of the heart muscle, which eventually outstrips its blood supply, and you get an angina type effect. All of these conditions in themselves over time become life-threatening. So it's not just about the way you feel when you've got these conditions, it's about what you need done in order to make sure you live a longer and healthier lifestyle.
Now, we heard from Felicity there that the first thing she knew about it was she was feeling a little bit breathless and so on. What are the typical things before people actually go to the doctor? What might they notice which could be an indication that something's wrong?
Well, often, Alistair, patients put it down to the fact that they're getting older. Doctor, I found that I was slowing down a bit. I wasn't able to do as much exercise on the treadmill. I see a lot of patients in their 30s and 40s with that sort of storyline. And they went to their GP, the GP listens to the heart, and they hear a heart murmur. And the investigations start from there. And sometimes patients don't know it for many, many years. And they will present with the consequences of their heart valve problem. And one of the big consequences that we always try and avoid in patients who've got mitral valve regurgitation or a leaking mitral valve, like Felicity's, is to try and avoid the condition called atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular heartbeat. The problem with atrial fibrillation is that it reduces the efficiency of the way the heart works by more than 30%, which is huge. But more important than that, it renders the patient requiring blood thinners, anticoagulants for the rest of their life, something like warfarin or some of the newer types of treatments we can currently provide, all of which are really things you'd want to avoid if we could diagnose those conditions sooner. We are actually now offering patients with mitral valve regurgitation an operation if that valve leaks severely, even if they don't have any symptoms, because we know that by intervening sooner rather than later to repair that valve, we can really change the long-term outcome and put those patients back on a normal life curve.
So I presume one of your messages today is going to be, if you sense anything not quite right, for goodness sake, go and see your GP.
Oh, absolutely. If you develop a new symptom that's not quite right, you get pain in the chest that stays with you, particularly when you're exerting yourself, or you're just tired, slowing down or getting breathless when you exert yourself. These are all potential indicators of some kind of cardiovascular or perhaps respiratory problem, lung problem. But either way, you probably need to just be checked out. And the other big indicator of the types of diseases that you might suffer as you get older are family history, looking at your family history, looking to see what diseases your mother or your father or your brothers or your sisters have had, or even further back in your family history. Those are good predictors of the sorts of things that you might suffer. And being cognizant of the types of symptoms that they can create, or in the modern era these days, more and more patients are seeking screening to try and look for those conditions long before they create problems, can be a big game changer.
We're going to come on in a short while to things we can do to get ourselves healthier and hopefully prevent some of these conditions in the first place. But you were talking there about hereditary factors. What percentage typically is it down to hereditary factors versus our lifestyle?
That's a very good question. It's probably very difficult to answer because there's no real data that's available. If we look at something like coronary artery disease, a very common disease, furring up of the heart arteries. In fact, actually, it's furring up of the arteries all over the body. If we look at that, we know that there are many risk factors. We know that family history plays a part. We know that undiagnosed diabetes that's poorly controlled can play a part. We know blood pressure plays a part, smoking plays a part, and you can see, and diet, of course, from last week's show, but you can see when you've got a multitude of risk factors like that, it's always difficult to tease out one specific thing. I think it would be fair to say that if you have a mother or a father or both parents who've had coronary artery disease that has resulted perhaps in a heart attack or in the need for surgery, then the chances that you're going to have a problem there are quite significant. And one could argue a position where we should look more aggressively at those individuals to make sure they don't develop silent disease, because silent disease is the sort of disease that really is something we should be able to avoid in the modern era.
Now, Mr. Birdi, you're one of very few, you were telling me before, only 6 in the country that performed this keyhole heart surgery. Very quickly and in layman's terms, could you explain exactly the difference between what we would normally associate as traditional heart surgery and what you do?
So traditional heart surgery is performed through the breastbone. Traditional heart surgery has been performed for 50 plus years. The results are fantastic, and the outcomes from heart surgery have progressively improved over the decades. And if you look at how we used to do it back in the 40s and the 50s, the way you would do a heart operation, quite literally, was without any kind of support for the heart or the lungs. And the very first type of heart surgery performed was a way by which one would support the circulation of a baby by connecting the baby to the circulation of a parent in order to then operate within the heart. Lillehei is the heart surgeon that was the pioneer there. An amazing thing. One of those few operations where if things didn't go well, you lost 2 patients instead of 1. We've gone from that to really having an outcome from heart surgery where the success is more than 98% for most types of heart surgery.
So for starters, people shouldn't be too nervous when the success rate's
So I think traditional heart surgery is very good, but patients don't like to have their breastbone broken. And when you think about it, although we do it in a very controlled manner, it is a broken bone. It doesn't hurt particularly, but it's a big cut, and it takes 12 weeks to heal. So if you're a young lady, you don't want your breastbone broken because you can't wear the types of clothes you'd like to wear. You're a bit more conservative about what you want to wear. And in actual fact, when we went to some of the countries where restrictions are slightly greater, there are even some issues with the risks of finding a marital partner if one has a breastbone cut. Being able to hide these cuts on the side between ribs means not only have you got a more cosmetically appealing wound, you've got something that heals in 7 days instead of 12 weeks.
We've only got a minute before we've got to go to break. So very, very quickly, first of all, who can have it done and how much better is it? Does it matter whether you have it done through keyhole or the traditional method?
I think it can make a big difference to a patient's recovery, but the 2 key issues are to make sure that you are going to have a keyhole heart operation performed by a group of individuals who have been doing it for some substantial period of time. I think the operation is very safe, but the individuals who do it must be experienced in the area. Then we can really garner the benefits of keyhole heart surgery.
And what about people who can actually have it done versus those who can't? What percentage can or can't, and what's the difference?
About 65% of the patients who contact me through the Keyhole Heart Clinic to be considered for keyhole heart surgery are actually found to be suitable. So it's always worth asking the question.
Well, we're going to talk a lot more about this after the break. My goodness me, I've got so many questions, but I know that our viewers at home will also have lots of questions. And straight after the break, we're going to talk more about the preventative measures that we can take as well. But it is time for a short break now. But when we return, we will be answering all of your questions that you actually have. So please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Health Show, and our guest today, who is cardiac surgeon Mr Inderpaul Birdi, who's been speaking about the importance of caring for the heart, as well as his new groundbreaking heart surgery. Now, just before we open the phone lines, let's reintroduce our Ask the Pharmacist segment, where our qualified pharmacist Nadia Bakari gives advice on how to get information you need from your local pharmacist. This week, focusing on any heart problems that you may have.
Hi guys, I'm Nadia, your pharmacist. Thank you, Alistair, for your introduction. And today I'll be speaking to you about cardiovascular disease. About half of all adults have at least one risk factor for heart disease, which doubles the risk of developing the condition. The more risk factors you have, the higher your risk of developing heart disease. It may not be feasible to change all your risk factors. However, there is plenty you can do to reduce your risk and help protect your heart. Advice on the management of risk factors, such as diet, exercise and stress, can be given by your local pharmacist. Your pharmacist can provide support on how you can adopt a healthy lifestyle and how you can reduce the risk of developing heart disease. If you are a patient with established heart disease, it is important to know what medication you're taking, why you're taking it, and how it will affect you. When you are given a new prescription, speak to your pharmacist about the medication prescribed for you, its potential benefits and risks, how to take it safely, possible side effects of the medicines, taking other kinds of medicine at the same time, including over-the-counter medicines or supplements. Heart medicines come in many shapes and sizes. The most common are tablets or capsules. Now, these can be swallowed or possibly dissolved in water. Sometimes you have to keep the tablet under your tongue until it dissolves, but your pharmacist will give you that advice. Aerosol sprays are also another type of medicine, and you spray these under your tongue. Again, your pharmacist will show you how you can use this. Check with your pharmacist before taking any over-the-counter medicine, herbal medicines and supplements. For example, St John's wort, a very popular herbal antidepressant medicine, can interact with a number of medicines prescribed for heart conditions and can therefore alter their effectiveness. You should store your medicine in a cool, dry place, like your bedside cabinet. Please don't leave your medicines on a windowsill in the sunlight or keep it in your car. And always keep your medicine out of the sight and reach of children and pets. Where possible, you should keep your medicine in its original packaging to protect it and help you keep track of how much you've taken. You should never take medicines that have changed in colour, consistency or odour. So again, if you're unsure, please go and ask your pharmacist. If you have any old or leftover medicines, return them to your pharmacist who will dispose of them safely. This will help you to know exactly what you need to take and avoid confusion. For any further information or for any advice on cardiovascular disease or on your medicines, please visit your pharmacist. Back to you, Alistair.
Thank you, Nadia. More great tips there. Now, the lines are open for you at home watching to put your questions forward. Now, the number to call will be 020 7374 6423. And you can also email us at healthshow@islamchannel.tv. And again, once again, we must stress that should you suffer from any medical problems, it's always highly recommended that you contact your doctor or GP, as the Health Show gives you an alternative viewpoint to the health concern being discussed. So as the calls come in, I just want to talk to you, Mr Birdi, about prevention. We heard Nadia talking there a little bit about some of the things that will happen once you go to your pharmacist, but to get to you before you get to that stage, we talked about, hereditary factors. We hear about stress being part of it and also our diet. Perhaps you could go through a few real golden rules of how we can look after our hearts.
Well, Nadia presented some very important features there. I think that stress is always one of those things that's in our life. It's very difficult to manage. Stress increases blood pressure. It increases the release of certain types of hormones within the body that can be damaging to the cardiovascular system. We know that certain ailments like diabetes, blood pressure, can remain undiagnosed for long periods of time. And I think for me, the addition to what Nadia has just said is that in actual fact, some simple blood tests sometimes can be all that's required to find a condition, to effectively treat it, either conservatively by dietary modification or otherwise, in order to make a very significant difference. Diabetes is a classical example.
And as you say, the earlier you get it, the better.
Absolutely.
And actually, we have our first caller already on the line.
Good.
So let's go to our call, and if we get a chance, we'll talk more about preventative measures in a while. But good afternoon. Mr Birdi's here. What would you like to ask him?
Hello.
Hello, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi. My name is Hannah. I'm calling from Kent today. I'm really enjoying today's show. I have a question. I'd just like to find out, does my family history mean I'm more at risk of heart disease?
And actually, that's something we did talk about a little bit earlier on. But what chance is there that it would be more so, would you say, Mr Birdi?
Can I ask you how old you are?
Well, I'm actually 25 right now.
Well, you see, there's the key in everything that you've asked. I think the first thing I'd say is that if you have a family history of heart disease, then yes, there'll be an increased risk of heart disease for you. Being a lady means that risk is probably slightly more curtailed than if you were a young man. But the fact that you're asking this question at the age of 25 is critically important, because it's now that we can make a big difference. And I would suggest at this stage in your life, being conscious of this issue is important. I think doing all the things that you know that you should be doing, a healthy diet, a healthy lifestyle, trying to avoid stress as much as possible, exercising regularly, because we know that exercise stimulates the right hormones in your body, it reduces blood pressure, all these things will make a huge difference. And at some point, I guess in your life, you will want to know a little bit more. And I think that certainly if you have diabetes in your family, certainly in young age for perhaps your parents or older brothers and sisters, then a simple blood test to look at your blood sugar, or even a urine test, could be something that could be done very easily, very cheaply, free on the NHS for most people. And it can make a huge difference, because if there is a problem there, then simple dietary modifications in the first instance, or if needed, treatments can make a huge difference to the next 50 years of your life, to try and prevent you from having to see me, which is actually really what I'm really keen to try and do going forward.
So really good advice in terms of how to prevent. And very quickly, while we just get our next caller on the line, you talked there about having a healthy diet. To many people, they will know exactly what they should be eating and should be avoiding. But maybe you could go through a few key food groups that we should be focusing on.
Sure. I wish my wife was here, actually, because she's actually a nutritional dietitian for the Keyhole Heart Clinic. But obviously, she's trying to work on me. I don't have family history, but I have put on a little bit more weight since that last video you showed. I think what she tells me is to eat at the right times of the day is really, really important. A lot of people miss their breakfast. They shouldn't miss breakfast. Breakfast is really important to get you started in the day. And for breakfast, I think, you mentioned, Alistair, what you have for breakfast. I think a good vegetable load first thing in the morning is not a bad way to start the day. It'll engage the brain. It's not always the most pleasant way to take breakfast, but there are more pleasant ways to have it.
Okay, and we'll come to, if you don't mind, sorry to
sure.
interrupt, we'll come back to that, because a lot of it might come up in our calls as well. So hold that thought with breakfast and having a healthy diet. But we do have another call on the line. You're through to Mr. Birdi. What would you like to ask?
Hello.
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 We can't hear anybody. I'm not sure if anybody's...
hello.
Oh, there you are. Hello.
Hi. I just wanted to ask about the palpitation high sometime. What does that mean?
Palpitations?
Yeah.
Well, palpitations typically means that you're feeling your heartbeat irregularly, or sometimes regularly, but it's something that most of us are not conscious of. When we exercise aggressively, sometimes we do feel the pounding of the heart, and we're used to that, so we think that's normal. But sometimes at rest, particularly at rest, some patients can feel suddenly that the heart starts to beat, and it creates a degree of fear within them, and sometimes it creates dizziness. And I think certainly if you get dizzy and you get breathless with palpitations, or they last for long periods of time, you probably ought to have that investigated and see your doctor in the first instance. Palpitations can occur on their own and be related to the way we live our lives, and stress and excess caffeine are the typical issues there. But they can also be related to problems with your heart, and particularly your heart valves. So I think certainly if you get palpitations at rest that make you feel unwell, you should probably go and see your doctor to have that looked at.
Great advice. Thank you very much. We've got quite a few callers on the line, so we'll try and get through as many of you as we possibly can. So, hello, good afternoon. You're through to Mr. Birdi. What would you like to ask?
Hello?
Hello, can we...
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Hello there. What would you like to ask Mr. Birdi?
Yeah, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, my question is, two members of my family, they have a pacemaker fitted. They both died in sudden death. If this thing is not successful, why you guys fitting it, please? Let me know.
Now, very interesting question. And I'm very sorry to hear what's happened to your family members, firstly. Were they pacemakers, or were they a device called defibrillator? Do you know whether it was a defibrillator that was fitted?
Unfortunately, it would appear that we've actually lost him.
I'm sorry.
So maybe very, very briefly, if you could give the answer to if it was either of those.
Sure. Well, we can put all sorts of different devices into patients' hearts. Usually a pacemaker is used to regulate the heart rate because it's too slow. And without that pacemaker, a patient will not survive or become very symptomatic. And so clearly they're life-saving. There is a different type of implantable device called a defibrillator. This is something that can also be a pacemaker, but it's also something that in the event that the heart beats in a very, very dangerous rhythm, the one we see on some of the TV shows we see, ventricular fibrillation, where the heart just wriggles but doesn't create any output. If that is not shocked back into regular rhythm, the patient will die. And the defibrillator is designed to do that in certain types of people. Now, the thing, going back to the question, if you have a defibrillator, often it's because you've got a very sick heart. And we know that defibrillators can make people live longer when they're fitted, but unfortunately we're still dealing with a problem with the heart that over time...
But again, it is a massive success rate on the whole.
Indeed.
Although obviously we're very sorry for the gentleman's family, but, you know, on the whole, they're actually fairly successful. But I know we've got another call on the line. Lots of you trying to get through. Please do keep on trying to get through. And if you can't get through to us on air, then do send us an email and we'll answer your questions that way. But who have we got now? Hello.
Hi there. My name is Valerie. Thanks for having me on. I was just wondering, Doctor, if you could help me with something. Basically, I'm having a lot of discomfort and heaviness in my chest. I feel like I have a shortness of breath, perhaps maybe even palpitations, and I really feel nauseous all the time. Is this a symptom of like a heart disease or something?
May I ask a question? How old are you?
I'm 23.
23. Well, the first thing to say, at the age of 23, the chances of you having a dangerous heart problem is very, very low. Mm-hmm. Having said that, patients shouldn't really be getting chest pain and breathlessness. I don't know whether you find that you suffer from anxiety a great deal, because that can sometimes produce this problem. Mm-hmm. And dealing with that issue can sometimes rectify the issue. Having said that, though, I wouldn't wish to put your symptoms down to anxiety alone. What I would say is at the age of 23, unlikely to have a serious problem, but if it continues to cause you some concern, I would suggest you go and see your doctor so that you can look at a few simple tests that can exclude any problem with your heart. And a simple test like an ECG and an echo scan, a bit like ladies have pregnant jelly scans of their babies, well, we can do a jelly scan of the heart. It's very painless. If you've got a structurally normal heart on that test, the chances of you having a heart problem are very, very low.
And actually, the chances are, once you have that test and you can find out what it actually is, it might actually reduce your anxiety.
Absolutely.
Interesting enough, very, very quickly, we've got a lot of younger people calling, and I presume it's quite a positive thing that people are actually aware of their bodies.
I think people are more and more aware of their bodies, and that's something I've learned from my wife, who's a dietitian and nutritional therapist. A lot of patients are now trying to find ways to modify the way they eat in order to make themselves feel better. And actually, there are many things one can do.
If you don't mind, we'll hold that thought because we've got some more people on. But absolutely, it's great that people are calling in and getting advice at an earlier age so that it's beneficial for them. Hello, good afternoon. You're through to Mr. Birdi.
Hi, good afternoon, Doctor. I just want to say I'm a fan of the show. I'm calling from Birmingham, and I was wondering if you could help me.
Sure.
So I've recently just come out of a divorce, and I'm now experiencing a lot of chest pains. I'm finding it quite difficult to get out of bed. I have read online about the heartbreak syndrome, and I was wondering how accurate that was and what I can kind of do to feel better.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear the stresses in your life right now.
Thank you, Doctor.
And I think, again, I would ask the very, very important question of how old are you?
I'm 25 years old.
A lot of what you're saying to me fits very closely with the last caller, in a way, in that the chances of you having a serious heart condition is very low. I think the word heartbreak syndrome isn't really a medical syndrome that relates to a type of heart disease that can be life-threatening, but heartbreak is a very painful process to go through. What I would suggest that you do, if you're really worried about this, is go down the same lines as I've suggested with the last caller. A simple scan of your heart will exclude major heart disease. I suspect that's not the problem for you. Have you thought about perhaps talking to somebody about the difficulties you're going through, perhaps seeing a counsellor about some of the issues to see whether that might help you, in addition to perhaps looking to have your heart looked at more closely? Have you thought about those things?
I've attempted to talk to, I guess, family and close friends, and it's everybody's been quite dismissive. But it's more of a physical pain for me as well as the emotional distress.
Sure. Well, like everything else, I think a few simple tests could exclude any possibility that you have heart disease, and see your doctor. And I mean, if you wanted to get in touch with us at the Keyhole Heart Clinic, you're always welcome to do so. We do have a screening program that we offer to patients.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Doctor. Let's move on to our next caller. Great so many of you are calling in. Please keep them coming. Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. Yeah, I suffered from pulmonary emboli, and then after that, I suffered again from pulmonary hypertension.
Yes.
I had an endotheliectomy operation at Papworth Hospital.
Yes.
And presently, I'm on Clexane and warfarin, which I've been told will be for life. But the problem I'm having now is with my INR. It's never okay, always fluctuating. My last result was 1.1, which was scary. And my GP was like, they have to send me back to St. Thomas's because it's been playing up. And I'm a very complicated patient. So the problem now, I don't know why my INR keeps playing up like this. And anytime the INR is either high or low, I find it difficult to walk. My feet are all paining me. I don't sleep at night. My feet are in an excruciating pain. I don't sleep. The veins are all paining, everything.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm really worried.
Thank you very much indeed for that. First of all, Mr. Birdi, if you could just, there's a few acronyms in there. For those of us who may be not quite so familiar with those terms, could you just very quickly tell us what they are so we can answer the caller's question?
So from that description, a beautiful description, by the way, this lady suffers from a condition called pulmonary embolus, which is where clots can fly off into the circulation and land into the lung arteries and block the arteries in the lung. When they block the arteries in the lung, they can have two effects. The first effect is to reduce the amount of lungs that can actually send oxygen into the bloodstream, or more sinister than that, it can create a block that prevents blood flowing around the body at all, which is a life-threatening condition. These clots often come from the legs. So you hear about when you fly and you have certain types of conditions, you have to take certain types of medicines, wearing flight stockings and so on and so forth. These are ways to try to prevent these clots forming, these DVTs that can fly off. Now, the treatment is usually blood thinners. And in some situations, as in this lady's situation, we have to go in and scrape that clot out of the lung arteries in order to improve the way the heart works and also to improve the way the lung works. It's called pulmonary endarterectomy. Literally on a heart-lung machine at a very cool temperature, we go into the pulmonary arteries and we scrape these clots out. The problem she has now is that she's on blood thinners, and the blood thinners she's on, warfarin, typical blood thinner, rat poison, is not giving her a situation where her blood is being properly thinned out. And the usual problem with this is that the way we live our lives, the other medicines we take, the food we eat, the drinks we drink, and the way we eat and drink them can sometimes interfere with the way warfarin works. And so, whilst it's not always going to be a solution that corrects this particular situation, I would strongly advise, with all that she's been through, that she sees a dietitian through her GP to go through the way she lives her life, the food she eats, the things she drinks, to see whether there's anything she's doing there that interferes regularly with the way the warfarin works, either too much or too little. Cranberry juice is a typical example, but there are so many other things we do that can really interfere with the effects of warfarin.
Really good advice there. Thank you very much indeed. And I hope that's helping our cause. And thank you for explaining everything as well. It's really, really helpful. Hello, good afternoon. You're through to Mr. Birdi.
Hello, hi, Doctor. This is Lisa McCune calling from Surrey, England.
Hello.
How are you?
Okay, thank you.
I just have a question. I'm 48 years old and I've experienced quite a bit of chest pain lately due to a few financial constraints. It's just usually when I'm quite anxious. Is this normal?
Yeah, this is coming up quite a bit, isn't it, stress? We've only got a couple of minutes left, so could you maybe talk a little bit about stress and the effect it has on our heart and what we can do to maybe help alleviate that and then the subsequent symptoms?
Well, stress can help affect us in many different ways. It can create types of pains that are actually nothing to worry about. The typical type of pain of stress is a sharp pain in the chest. But age is the key here. This lady's 48 years of age, and the questions I'd like to ask her are, what is the nature of the pain? Is it a dull pain that goes down her arm? Is it when she exercises? Is it when she's asleep at night? Because when we exercise, you're more typically going to develop the kind of angina-type pains of heart disease, of coronary artery disease. And of course, if she's got a family history, and particularly if she's also diabetic and being treated for high blood pressure, here's an example of where I'd really want to know a lot more about this pain
so
to make sure it isn't heart disease.
To see her doctor and describe the pain, so then you can see if there is anything else lurking there.
Absolutely.
We've got our last caller. We're going to just squeeze you in before we have to go off air. Good afternoon.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hi.
please go ahead and ask your question.
Hiya. I suffer from a lot of acid reflux.
Okay. And you'd like some feedback on what you can do about it?
Basically, I had H. pylori 2-3 years ago, which thinned my stomach lining. And after that, I've been having loads of reflux problems, gas, indigestion problems. I'm on omeprazole twice a day. I've got Gaviscon as well, but I don't know what it is. It's just not helping. I feel heaviness on my chest.
It's a very, very common condition. A lot of people suffer it, and I think it's got to do with the way we live our lives these days, the types of food we eat, and also, I guess, the types of drinks we drink. High fat foods, foods with spices in them, particularly we carry on too much weight. These are the simple things that we can try and avoid that will help these symptoms. When you are on multiple medicines like that, and you've had Helicobacter pylori, which is a type of bacteria that grows in the stomach and can create this problem, and the treatment is medical to try and eradicate that, and usually it gets rid of the problem. But when you have that many medicines on board, then it's really quite difficult to control the symptoms. I think that one of the things that helped me was to raise the head of my bed, because I do get a lot of indigestion as well. And raising the head of the bed at night times means that I don't get so much reflux. And by doing that simple maneuver, I don't get the injury in the lower food pipe that then creates my problems for the rest of the day. The other big thing to do is to drink good amounts of fresh water, and also not to eat too late at night, because that can really catch you too.
Some really good tips there. And actually, we've literally got 30 seconds left. If you could give people 1, 2 or 3 really quick things, absolutely think about this if you're looking after your heart, what would they be?
Exercise regularly, eat healthily, look on the internet, it tells you exactly what you've got to do. If you need to know more, you can visit the website, the Keyhole Heart Clinic, visit nutritionclinic.com. These are free portals for you to get the advice you need.
You've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. There you have it, some really important and unique advice on keeping your heart healthy and helping you hopefully to avoid surgery. And if you do need it, then perhaps as you've heard today, keyhole surgery is the way to go. Now, we hope that the information you've heard has helped you. It's certainly given me a lot to think about as well. Now, we must stress that all views and opinions on this show are strictly those of our expert and guest. Should you suffer from any type of illness, as you've heard, it is always recommended that you go and see your local GP or a medical consultant first. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you, Mr Birdi, as well, and for explaining it so well. We really appreciate that. It's been a real pleasure. And if you'd like to find out more about caring for your heart and keyhole heart surgery, then please do email us at healthshow@islamchannel.tv. And join me next time when we'll be discussing the importance of getting your bowels checked and the public health programme that in Public Health England have set up for the elderly. But for now, it's thank you very much and goodbye. Assalamu alaikum and goodbye. Thank you.